Hello and welcome to Pichael's Picks. Unfortunately, I did not win the $2,000. I was robbed, I think is the only fair way to say it. I had a lot of the teams picked correctly. I was high on Optic, and that almost paid off very well, but it did not. So super sad. Sad world we live in. Uh, I didn't post a video for the Sunday slate, just didn't have any time. But I'm going to try to get this one out today. This is going to be a video for the next three LCK slates, and they're all 2-game slates. And I want to go over these three slates, and I want to discuss some 2-game slate theory, which is very important. And lastly, I'd like to talk about some of the issues holding back esports on DraftKings, because 2-game slates are terrible. But I'll save that for later. So first, let's just get into the matchups. First up, we have SKT versus Kongdu Monster. Everyone knows that SKT is the favorite. SKT has looked good recently. They've made some roster changes, and it's really changed how SKT is approaching the game. They have a much different play style right now, and they're finally growing into it. So I'd expect SKT to win quite convincingly. I don't think there's a reason to think they would lose. And one thing to keep in mind is that when you're playing DraftKings for the LCK, it's a 3-game slate, so there is a premium on teams that you think can 2-0 the enemy team. That's why I'd be leaning towards getting SKT onto my team, onto my lineups, because the other matchup is much closer in talent. So we have Tall versus Roach. I think it's going to be Blossom versus Raze, Faker versus Edge, Bang versus Soul, and Wolf versus Secret. Really, there's nothing too crazy to think about. You need to figure out whether you want to have more of a cash game lineup, in the sense where it's low volatility and you just want to cash, like you want to get into the money. And then once you determine what your basic lineup is, then you can start moving around players and trying to differentiate from the rest of the field, because I assume a lot of people are going to be taking SKT. And it's fine because the contests are smaller and you have the players who always want to be contrarian, even if it's not the best theoretical play. So you're not going to have to play against every single lineup that has SKT in it, but you do need to figure out ways to differentiate yourself. So another important thing is which set is going to have more kills altogether. I think if you watched the North American LCS over the weekend, you saw that there were certain matchups where going into it, you kind of knew that there were going to be several team fights, and even the losing team could get close to 10 kills, and that's where all the DraftKings points are. So in this matchup, do you think that SKT versus Kongdu Monster is going to be a bloodbath, or do you think KSV versus KT will be more of a bloodbath? And the reason SKT is a strong choice tomorrow is because, first of all, it could turn into a bloodbath, and second of all, they have the upside of 2-0ing, which seems much less likely in the next set. And the other set tonight is KSV versus KT, Smeb versus QV. Remember, KSV, they won the World Championship last year, but KT, they're a very popular team, very strong team, very talented, so they are still the favorite in this matchup. Smeb versus QV, it's pretty similar. In the jungle, Score versus Ambition, probably Pawn versus Crown, Deft versus Ruler, and Matap versus Core JJ. I think it will most likely be a 3-game set. So the question you need to ask yourself is, will this 3-game set outweigh the sweep bonus that SKT will probably get? And I think it could. I think it could potentially. I think a KSV KT stack makes a lot of sense, especially in a 2-game slate, because if SKT goes out there and wins 2 games easily, they don't need to score a lot of points. They just out macro them. That's completely fine. KSV versus KT, they're going to be much less likely to lay down and die. So when there's a big objective coming up, they're going to be willing to fight over it because they know it's the only way that they can win. And I think it's going to be an interesting slate. I think SKT, there's a lot of upside there, but I think the higher upside is in the second set, because if one of those team 2-0s, it will be in a more closely contested set, and there will be more kills, I think. I'd be interested. I'm going to love to watch these games tonight. Next up, this is going to take place on the 21st, okay? We have Afrika Freaks versus Jin Air. This is the closer matchup. No, this is the less close matchup. Neither of these should be very close. Afrika Freaks is better than Afrika Freaks are better than Jin Air, and Rox is better than MVP. I don't think many people would argue against that. This is one of the problems with 2-game slates. They're just not very interesting. Like, you have the 2 sets, you just need to mix and match and see what happens. And then once you have the mix and matched combinations, then you can start trying to differentiate your lineups. But you go through here, and it kind of depends on how the games play out. I mean, Afrika Freaks, you have Kuro, Kramer, and Tucson. You have Spirit and Kin. I mean, they could win this match so many different ways. It's hard to pin down who the high value players are going to be, because there are so many different ways that they can win this match, and you kind of just have to throw darts at a dartboard. So this is going to be a situation where you will most likely want to run out multiple lineups instead of trying to take down every contest with the same lineup. You probably want to differentiate and gain exposure to the different players and different combinations of players, because you want to have the contest winning upside. So in this, I think Afrika Freaks is definitely going to win. And I think Rox Tigers is going to win. Linderang, Sungwon, Lava, Songyun, and Ki. And that really boils the entire slate down to which underdog performs better. That's what this entire slate is, and that's so boring to me. Like, you're picking who's going to lose less, because that's generally how these things play out. Which one of these matchups, where can a team steal a win? And it's tough. I'm not saying it should be easy, but just look at the talent disparity between these teams. I mean, I could see there is a possible world out there where Afrika Freaks 2-0s and Jin Air gets a total of 10 kills in 2 games, and Rox just dominates MVP, and there's a total of 10 kills in 2 games. And then the bonuses cancel each other out. The underdogs perform similarly, and then which favorite performs slightly better, that feels bad. And that's why I don't like playing 2-game slates. Most of the time I sit it out. If I think that if I think I have some kind of leverage on the field because I see the matchup differently than most people, then I'm more likely to put a contest. I'm more likely to play in the contest and there's some lineups out there. But I think this one I'll probably stay away. Not super interesting. Really don't like any of the potential options I have. Maybe that'll change by the time the contest begins, but I doubt it. Last up, BBQ Olivers versus Kingzone. Con versus Crazy. Peanut versus Bono. BDD versus Tempt. Prey versus Ghost. Gorilla versus Ignar. This is a slightly interesting matchup. Don't hate it. I think BBQ does have a chance to win 2 games, sorta. I'd put it like a 70-30. Or maybe less because it's a 3-game set. Probably set 80-20. But Crazy is a good player. Tempt's a good player. Ignar is a pretty good player. The problem is Kingzone is just so much better most of the time. Khan's very good. Peanut's very good. BDD's very good. Prey and Gorilla are a great bot lane. They're one of the best bot lanes in the world. So your money has to be on Kingzone. You need to have some exposure to Kingzone. That's just the way that it is. So that means most people who go through this process of creating a lineup will start off with Kingzone. Do you pivot away from that? I don't know. Seems like the highest equity play. Depends on what contest you're playing. Depends on how much risk you're willing to assume in your lineups. But Kingzone definitely the favorites in that one. And then we have Kongdu against KSV. Looks like Kongdu is going to have to deal with 2 losses this week. They might get 4-0'd. in 4 games. Very sad. But yeah, again, similar situation to the last slate. There's not much going on here. This will probably end up being a 2-0, and that's no fun. So the first slate, fine. It's a good slate. This slate, garbage slate. This slate, garbage slate. And there's no way to avoid that because the schedules are created before the season starts and everyone has to play each other. That's fine. But DraftKings needs to do a better job of creating interesting contests. And the reason I say that is because look at the margins that they're making on this. You have a $1,350 contest, and they're taking a 10% margin. So they're taking a 10% rake on this. $135 out of the prize pool is going straight to DraftKings, and that's fine. They're entitled to some money. They collect all the money. They need to pay their employees. I have no problem with that. But what I do have a problem with is how uninteresting some of these slates are, because as DraftKings players, people who continuously give money to DraftKings in order to host these contests because they're fun and interesting and give an extra incentive to watch the games and care about the games, they're just taking money and not putting out an interesting product. So I think the onus is on DraftKings to provide players something interesting. And there are many ways to do that. I'm not sure why they give us these terrible 2-game slates, but it's hard to think there's a reason other than the money. On these 3 nights, on every individual night this week, these three slates of 2 games, in the featured contests alone, there will be $4,330 wagered in total per night. So that's what, 13 grand, something like that. $1,500 is coming out of the prize pools and being given to DraftKings. And is that fine? Whatever. Maybe. I mean, 10% rake, it seems like a lot. I think the players would be better off pushing for larger, more interesting slates and more competitive pricing, more interesting price decisions that we have to make. Because right now, I mean, we've seen it over the weekend. We've seen it for years that DraftKings and esports have been a thing, that the lineup construction so often comes down to like which stack. It's just mixing and matching stacks. And after a while, that gets really boring and it's very frustrating because you can think to yourself, I'm making good decisions and I'm getting edged out on very slim margins just because of the way that DraftKings does their scoring and the way that DraftKings creates the slates and gives prices to players. And I think there's a lot that can be done with DraftKings to push where esports and DraftKings are moving, because it could be so much more interesting if they want to keep their 10% rake, give us something that's worth a 10% rake or more. Most of these contests are more than 10%. It's an average of 12% rake. So if you're going to take our money for that, then at least give us something interesting. That's all I'm asking for. So what does that mean? We need, like I said, more competitive pricing, larger slates, better slates, smaller rake. I mean, it's simple things, and a lot of the other popular sports on DraftKings have been able to push for this because the higher roller players were fed up with paying such a high rake, and I'm sure that most of the money from esports on DraftKings comes from a small minority of the players who are continuously pumping out lineups and don't have much to show for it partially because of the rakes. So that's really all I have for you today. I probably sound a little frustrated. Maybe it's because I had the $2,000 stolen from me, or it's because Optic chose to not take that team fight mid in their last game on Sunday, which would have potentially won me hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. But yeah, that's enough about me. So going into these slates, remember, it's important to differentiate. Don't give away too much equity trying to get a unique lineup, because I'd rather split first than come in last. Think seriously about, should you be putting money into 2-game slates? Because the only way that we can really get DraftKings to change how these slates work is to stop giving them money for 2-game slates. And personally, I've been practicing that for a long time. So you may want to join me in that. But thanks for watching, and good luck out there.